Okay, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation, Building a Category Defining Company, hosted in partnership with the Georgetown Angel Investor Network and the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance. My name is Stephanie Seitz. I work here on the alumni engagement team here at Georgetown, and it's a pleasure to gather so many of you, our alumni, students, and friends, for what promises to be an engaging and insightful discussion between two very accomplished members of our Georgetown community. Before we jump in, there's just a few housekeeping notes. As you can see, we're using a Zoom meeting format, so feel free to turn your camera on or keep it off if you're grabbing yourself lunch. But you can always pin Mary Ann and Jonathan on your screen so that you're sure to see them in full view for the conversation. And then we will be having Q&A at the end. So please leverage the chat function to put in any questions, and then Mary Ann and I will work through those at the end to help facilitate Q&A at the end of the conversation. So now I want to work on introducing our moderator today, who's Mary Ann Halford. Mary Ann graduated from the college and is an internationally recognized media entertainment executive advisor, entrepreneur, and board director. She helped build Fox International Channels Group and has advised leading global media companies and private equity investors through roles at FTI Consulting, Altman, and as an independent advisor. She is also a co-founder of the North American Midway Entertainment and an early advisor to Savd, now owned by Geo. Mary Ann brings not only deep industry experience, but also thoughtful and strategic lens to today's conversation about leadership and innovation. Mary Ann, thanks for being with us, and I will turn it over to you to kick off the conversation.
Great. Well, we have a very distinguished entrepreneur in our mix today. Well, he's the main stage, if you will, Jonathan Carson. When he left Georgetown, he actually was an entrepreneur at the very beginning, and had an amazing entrepreneurial journey in the 1990s and early aughts. And he's back at it again. So we are very lucky to be having a conversation with him. So, Jonathan, tell us about Antenna TV and not Antenna TV. I'm thinking about the Greek company. That's an international broadcasting company. No, but Antenna.live, which has become a really, well, I guess you're the definitive source for subscription data, correct? As we look at the SVOD or direct-to-consumer media and entertainment industry as it has evolved. What is unique about what you're doing versus what a smart manager could do with some smart people working for them and putting together some dashboards? What's the
Yeah.
cat?
What's the hook?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, really, really happy to be here. Thanks to Gain and Jima for putting this together. And thanks for the nice introduction, Stephanie. And really happy to be here with you, Mary Ann. We've been buddies for a bunch of years here, probably since we were really starting Antenna back back around pandemic times. So the premise for Antenna is that we provide marketplace data around subscription services. So we understand what people are subscribing to and lots of details around their acquisition and churn patterns. And the way we do it is we have a panel of about 2 million Americans for whom we study their financial transactions. And so we're seeing them sign up for services, we're seeing them cancel services, and then we extrapolate that out to the entire US population so we can count the number of subscribers and understand acquisition and retention and churn patterns. And more recently, just over the past couple of quarters, we've also been integrating viewership data. Our biggest category is we measure a number of different subscription categories, but by far we're best known for measuring video streamers. So now we're integrating the shows that people actually watch, so we can help these services and help the overall ecosystem understand when somebody signs up for a service, what are the first shows they watch, what are the viewing patterns that drive them to stick around, and then if they cancel a service, we can see what they do the next month on other services. So you ask a key question, why the services are obviously operating these apps themselves. So why can't they just look at their own internal customer data and get this same type of insight? And the answer to that is really straightforward. They can, but they can only do it for themselves.
Right.
And so if they want to compare themselves to the rest of the market, if they want to understand what are my subscribers doing off of my platform, that's where Antenna comes in.
So was there anybody else trying to do the same thing that you were doing when you started this? And what was the hole that you saw in the market when you and your co-founder came together to found this company?
Yeah, so the business model is definitely not new. This type of thing, some version of this type of concept exists in lots of different consumer categories. And I sold my first startup to Nielsen, and so got to know that business model very well. They're one of the most famous companies for that type of approach. But the doing it within this direct to consumer space, and especially the subscription space, had not happened before. I will say that when I first had the idea, I took it out to my network and brought it around to get feedback, and mostly people told me, terrible idea. Netflix is going to win the whole market. You'll have one customer, and if you only have one customer, they don't need you because they have their own data. So fortunately, that turned out not to be true. By the way, my first startup, Buzzmetrics, was also totally terrible idea on paper. So sometimes you have to kind of look beyond today to see that a need is going to emerge for a solution. The opportunity that I saw, obviously, I thought, okay, the market's going to be a little more dynamic than just Netflix. But beyond that, I saw there was just this movement to a really radically different consumer behavior in the way that individuals were going to engage with the media and entertainment category. And whenever there's a big shift in the way consumers make decisions, the way consumers make purchases, insights and data around that is really interesting for the players because they're trying to get a handle on what's actually happening. And this one was especially interesting because all of the media companies were going from essentially being like wholesale brands. In the old days, CBS, CBS and NBC, MTV, these companies did not have a direct relationship with their customers. They went through, the pay TV ecosystem. And so moving to a direct relationship meant that they were going to have much more intense needs. They were going to become CRM marketers for the first time. There was, go back 10, 15 years ago, there were no CRM databases at what is now Paramount. And we also had a theory that first party data was going to get them so far, but eventually they were going to need broader data that lived outside their walls. That one, I think we underappreciated how big of a deal that is, because in this new AI obsessed world, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but those AI algorithms what are they hungry for? They're hungry for data. And so if you're only feeding your internal customer data into them, it'll only get you so far before you need to bring in other fuel to support the bots.
That's an interesting transition. I mean, how does AI actually show up in your product today, and how are you integrating it? And what are the talents what are the types of people that are working for you that are able to master AI? What does that take?
Yeah, it's obviously a really hot topic. AI is all over our business, but it's traditionally, we've used it in kind of quote boring ways, like the ways that the industry has been doing for decades. So, the financial transaction data that we get is really messy, and we use all sorts of data science. A lot of it would fit under what people generally call AI. technologies in order to clean that data up. We have lots of different data sets. So we have to join them all together. That takes a lot of work. And then, we end up predictive models for our clients. And that's all, kind of under the umbrella of AI as well. But, those are not new things. Like when we hear all the buzz from the last couple of years, that's not what people are really talking about. We get some advantage of everything that's happening in the marketplace just because computing power is getting so much, dramatically stronger that we can do much more advanced math than we could even a few years ago. But the real advances people are talking about are all of the things that have come about because of large language models. And coincidentally, that is actually what we were working on when I first graduated at Georgetown and started BuzzMetrics. BuzzMetrics was the first business in the world to analyze social media. And so the big technical
And by
challenges.
the way, let everybody know when you founded this company, because I don't think Mark Zuckerberg was even in college yet when you founded.
Yeah, we started BuzzMetrics in 1999. And I say it was the first company to analyze social media. The term social media didn't even exist back then. So we were, going into early versions of online communities back at that time. But the big technological challenge then was we had massive amounts of unstructured data, and that's written text. And it's very hard at that time, it was very hard for machines to understand what to do with just, it was billions, literally billions of consumer comments that we were trying to sift through. So we had linguistic PhDs using kind of early versions of these neural network models to try to understand, if somebody made an online post and was talking about United, a machine had to figure out, are they talking about like peace and harmony, or are they talking about United Airlines? And if they're talking about United Airlines, are they positive or negative? That was a huge technological challenge back then. And, we were one of the first companies to really go after it. Now, fast forward 20 years, those technologies have emerged into large language models that do all these magical things that we see online. So it's the way artificial intelligence is used in our world of structured data, where you have a number sitting in a relational database, and then you have attributes associated with that number in the database to give it meaning. ChatGPT has no idea what to do with that number sitting in a database. So that there's kind of a completely different branch of AI that works in the data world that I live in.
So does that mean you have to build tools internally so that you're able to do the necessary analytics that some of the large LLMs can't help you with?
Yeah, that's the name of the game. That's the big thing that we do. And you asked about the talent that we bring on. It's essentially half a dozen different flavors of data specialists. So the data engineers are the ones that build the pipelines that move the data around. The data scientists are the ones with more kind of straightforward mathematics backgrounds that actually build all the models to clean the data, give it meaning, project it out to the population, build the predictive forecasts. And then we have data operations people that do all the quality checking, actually produce the data into a product, and then data analysts that make sense of it for clients.
And where are all those people based? Are they based here in New York, or are they distributed internationally? I was curious as to how do you go about recruiting the type of people that you need? And I have another question too. Do you need people that specifically understand data in terms of streaming services, or you just need people that know how to work with data?
Yeah, so we launched our first version of our product in March of 2020. And the world at the
What
time,
day? What day?
it was, I mean, it was literally like, March 17th or something. It was, yeah, it was crazy. The world was literally shutting down, which it was a really surreal experience because, for anybody that's ever launched a business before, it's all encompassing. It's very emotional. It consumes your life, and to go through that type of experience at the same moment that you're also wondering, is the world going to exist in a few months? It was really crazy. It did have the odd unintended effect of really accelerating our business, because the things we measure, all these digital subscription services, just took off, and so our business took off very quickly with them. One of the knock-on effects of that, though, was we were just three people and a couple of freelancers at that time, and and then we started growing very quickly. It forced us to build a fully remote team. And I, as the world started to reopen and people started coming back to office, my natural inclination was, all right, like, let's get an office. We were mostly in New York at that time, still pretty small, maybe a dozen people. And the team was like, well, no, like, we just built this whole thing culturally, operationally, we built everything to be remote. And you think if you're a founder, you think like you make all the decisions. That's not true at all. Like, I had to realize, like, all right, this is much bigger than me, that we've established a culture, we've established a way of working. And so we're now about 50 people and fully remote.
Fully remote.
So yeah, we have,
You get
a good base
together?
of people.
Do you get
Yeah, we
together
have
a
a
few
good
times?
base of people in New York and a couple other places where we happen to have a critical mass, and those groups all get together and co-work pretty often. But then beyond that, we bring our full team together twice a year for a week.
Mhm.
And that's, and then, various other small group in person. So we've, yeah, figured out a whole culture and rhythm around it. It's actually pretty amazing.
So it's interesting that you did launch in March of 2020, because literally 2020 was the year where so many of the various SVOD services actually had their debuts, if you will. And it caused a mad frenzy within the media and entertainment industry because of all the various players entering into the market. So did that help you in terms of being able to get a number of these parties to be subscribers to your service?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, Disney launched in November of 2019, Disney Plus. They were very successful right out of the gate. We were able to capture what was happening with them. The whole industry was trying to figure out what's going on with Disney. So that got us a lot of attention. And then, what happened is the rest of the media companies were, they were kind of working their way towards launches, but they accelerated things dramatically because the pandemic lockdown, it essentially pulled consumer behavior forward. So things that we thought consumers were going to be ready for in 3 years and 5 years and 7 years, all of a sudden they were doing those things in 2020. And so then the media companies quickly responded. They put much more energy behind their launches. They put their feet, they remember that year they were all putting their theatrical feature
Hmm.
films directly to the streaming services. They started moving their sports rights much faster than they had planned. So the whole thing accelerated, which then, really drove a lot of hunger for the data and perspective that we had.
So did you have any challenges getting any of them to sign up, or were they all like, we need this because we're launching, we need to know as much as possible about our business?
Yeah. So the thing with these types of data businesses where you're trying to establish yourself as a market standard, you actually have a small window. That's
Mhm.
not something you can do. It's so based on credibility that it's not something you can do over a bunch of years, nice and slow. slowly earn trust, slowly learn. You got to go in and kind of run the table pretty
So,
quickly.
so, so what's your secret sauce? So how did you do? How did you run the table very quickly and get? Because as you told me when we talked, you have all of the major companies signed up to
Yeah.
your.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of them took longer. I won't name names, but it's probably the ones you would expect if you follow the industry. But no, certainly the fact that I had been in the space and had good relationships with, senior folks at the clients helped. Now, when I was doing Buzzmetrics, I had no credibility. I was like, playing in punk rock bands in Washington, D.C. at the time. So I was a nobody. So it's the credibility is not essential. It did help in this case, especially when we were trying to move so fast. What we did is we were really careful about um, taking our time launching. By the time we launched, we had good confidence that the product was robust. We had tested it out with some clients to make sure the data passed the sniff test. And you typically hear about like an enterprise software company or a consumer app wants to get an MVP, a minimally viable product into market very quickly, and it may barely work, but then you just kind of quickly iterate from there. We couldn't do that. We had to our first version had to be robust enough that it resonated in the marketplace. So that was one thing that we did. We also came out very, very transparently. So we really talked. We had our methodology very well figured out, the way that we were actually putting these numbers together. And then we were very, very open and direct and honest about what that methodology was, including, showing where the limitations were. I used to joke that our sales decks looked more like we were trying to talk our customers out of buying the data than trying to talk them into buying the data, because it had so many disclaimers and cautions. But that transparency really brought the clients in and generated a lot of trust. And then, yeah.
Well, you recruited 2 million people though to be part of this panel, so that had to have been probably one of the most. Not only was developing a methodology around it, but then also getting that right balance within that 2 million. That must have been an important objective or an important goal in the early days of
It
developing the product.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a good year and a half actually building the product. Now, I should mention I call it a panel. When you talk about panels, it's usually something that you directly recruit. We actually license all of our
Oh,
data. From now, there's in today's day and age, there's all these, so much data is available. There's all these data intermediaries. And actually, the data that we use, the financial transaction data, is really oriented towards use cases for Wall Street trading. And
really?
so these quantitative hedge funds that suck in all this
Hmm.
marketplace data to build their quantitative trading models. This consumer transaction data is one of the big data sources they use. Our kind of novel twist on this was use that data to understand consumer behavior for marketplace research, which is not the typical use case. But it did mean that we had to spend a bunch of time cleaning the data, assembling the right set of data. But it did mean that we didn't have to go out and actually, knock on doors to recruit the 2 million people.
Okay, interesting. And then are you adding more data to the process? I mean, now that you're moving into viewability, does that also
Yeah. Yeah. So
require
now
new data?
we have a big range of different data sets now that all come together. And the big new one is that we've licensed data it's directly from the TV manufacturers, the connected television sitting on your living room wall. Basically, the TV manufacturers are reading the
Samsungs and
glass.
the
Yeah,
Vizios
exactly.
and okay.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
they read the glass. They can see what programs are being watched, and then they license that data out. Like, again, it's usually a different use case. It's usually used for advertising targeting, but we're using it to tie together with the transaction data to understand what shows subscribers are watching.
So, given that you have everybody signed up for your service, how do you continue to scale and grow your business from there? I was curious.
Yeah. So when we first launched back in 2020, we were covering, I don't know, maybe 6 services. We now cover about 100. So, the service that we've been able to add coverage, which is one of our pricing dimensions over time. We also, the clients will typically start off just using the data in one department. And then as we spread now, those media companies are, almost all have organization-wide license access, which is another dimension. We're talking mostly about the big media companies, the Apples, the Warners, the Paramounts, the Disneys. We also now have a big, long list of smaller streamers, Hallmark, BritBox, Crunchyroll, the
AMC.
sports leagues, AMC, the technology platforms, Roku, Verizon. There's a whole set of ecosystem players that are customers as well. Now that we are also looking at the shows that people are watching and how that impacts subscription, there's a whole new customer base that's open to us, which is the film studios, the talent agencies, the rights holders that are selling those shows. They, very famously, this was the big issue that at the center of the Hollywood strikes. They don't get data back from the streamers, or they get very select data back from the streamers. So they don't have a good understanding of how their shows perform, which makes it very hard for them to negotiate. And so that's kind of the new opportunity that we're going after. And that opens up a big new market for us.
So this is your second rodeo in terms of building a startup. This one is still in the growth phase. What's been the difference that you have seen in terms of what your experience was like back in the 1990s versus what it is today? I mean, obviously the world has changed significantly, but there are still underlying principles that are important to an entrepreneur, whether or not it was in the 1800s or it's today in the 20s. So,
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's really different for me personally. I'm 53 now, so I was about to turn 50 when we launched Antenna, and I was whatever, mid 20s when I launched Buzzmetrics. So that experience just personally is really different. But the world is really different too. I graduated in 95, and so it was kind of the dawn of the commercial internet. But it was a funny thing, and by 99, the dot-com boom was fully underway. A culture of entrepreneurship had really, started to bubble up as the hot thing that all the, MBA grads wanted to get into startups and stuff like that. But that hadn't happened in 95. In 95, when I started my very first startup, senior year of Georgetown, it was a website, and I had never actually been on the internet before. So we knew we wanted to create a website, but it was hard to get on the internet.
it was.
Back in 1994. You had to work at it. And
you had to do dial-up and wah, 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 wah.
Totally. Yeah,
all
exactly.
those noises.
Exactly. So the amount of infrastructure and cultural awareness and, kind of general tools available to support you in creating a startup back then versus now it's a whole other world. In a way, it gave you some advantage, because if you actually took the time to figure that out, even like getting something off the ground was, a bit of a barrier. Whereas, now, you spend a weekend vibe coding an app and you can be in the app store a few days later. So that's probably the biggest difference.
And did you raise money for Buzzmetrics early on? I know you have for Antenna. I was just curious.
We raised, I think we managed, by the time we were out, like actually working on this, the dot-com bubble had burst. And so the funding environment was terrible. We raised, I think it was like $47,000. That's how much I cobbled together,
Oh, wow.
gathering nickels from under my Georgetown friends' couches. And then I had, I don't know, 27 personal credit cards funding servers and things like that. So it was very, very bootstrapped in the early days.
Wow. And did you ever ultimately raise professional money in the?
So we didn't raise, but we ended up merging with another company that had Nielsen as a financial and strategic backer. And then Nielsen poured money into us, to grow from there.
Okay.
So, but
And
that was 5 years into the journey, though.
and then they ultimately acquired you as a business.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to go back to the growth part for the business. When you think about growing, do you also think about moving into the international world? Obviously, streaming services are global businesses today. Is
Yeah,
that
big,
part of
big.
the?
It's a big opportunity for us. The a portion of our clients are U.S. only, but a bunch of the clients are very global. So they have very, very little visibility into the marketplace around the world. So they are pushing us very hard. I did have lots of experience at Nielsen, and then in jobs afterwards with running global businesses. So I have a lot of humility about how hard it is, and we have made the decision we're definitely going to do it, but we're going to wait until we know that we're ready and we can deliver a high quality product and exploit it commercially. So I think that time's near, but we haven't gotten there yet.
So, what would be good for the audience, I think, is to understand how some of your clients are actually using your data, using the data that you have. I know that you really focused on standardizing data, and how does, without naming names, but if you can just give us examples of how they leverage your database to make critical decisions along the way.
Yeah, so a couple different uses, and this is not really specific to Antenna. This is lots of data businesses, kind of in our general structure would have the same experience. The first big use case is KPIs and benchmarking. So if I'm sitting at, say Hulu, and I see, my average churn over the last few months was 5.7%. And this month it was 7.1%. I want to know, is that a me thing, or did that happen to the whole market? So being able to benchmark your performance against competition is really important. And fortunately, that's a very sticky use case for data businesses as well, because once you get into that scorecard, I mean, anybody that has KPIs for their own business, which is hopefully every business, once you build that scorecard, you want to be consistent with it over time. That's the first one. The second one I'd say is fueling kind of big picture strategic decisions. And an example of that is there's a lot of movement like in the distribution landscape in our video streaming category right now. So services like Apple TV, Peacock, HBO Max, when they were originally launching their apps, they were very focused on owning the customer relationship, which means they wanted people to come to peacocktv.com, put in their email address, put in their credit card number, and do business directly with NBC. Now, in this era, as they're kind of looking for new generations of growth, they're doing a broader set of distribution deals. They're, bundling their service with Walmart Plus. They're making their service available within the Amazon and YouTube apps. They're, doing a special deal with a Verizon or or with the even the pay
T-Mobile or
TV. Yeah, exactly. And we have very good data about all of those different distribution channels. We measure virtually all of them. And so when they're trying to decide, do I want to actually distribute through YouTube or Amazon, which are, is a really sticky decision because those are also competitors, they can do all sorts of analytics on how those other platforms perform for the services that already distribute. And then the last use case is more tactical, kind of, day by day optimization. And, an example of that is Black Friday has become a really big time for the streaming industry. A bunch of the streamers offer these really aggressive price promotions on Black Friday. And, last year there was upwards of 10 million signups in one day. So it's kind of the biggest day of the year for the industry. We have really granular data about every single sign up that happens on Black Friday, how long those people stay, how many of them convert from the promotional price to the full price, all of that detail. If you're the marketing manager that's actually figuring out what should we do for Black Friday this year, being able to dig into all that historical data is really helpful at figuring out, should it be $2.99 or $3.99? Should it be 4 months or 6 months?
what are the things that are pushing people to subscribe, though? I mean, yeah, obviously you said Black Friday, but is it getting the bundle that is important, or is it getting reduced prices? Uh, I was just curious as what are the motivating factors for signups, or is it content?
Yeah, content is a huge part of it for sure. Not surprisingly, the NFL
Yeah.
is the biggest factor, but we just released data saying that in the first 90 days after its series premiere, 3 million new subscribers watched Landman on Paramount Plus, which was at the time a brand new show that nobody had ever heard of before. So big hit shows, big hit films, big sports events. These kind of big moments are the number one factor. Price promotions and different, I'll call it pricing and packaging. So interesting new bundles. Apple TV and Peacock just launched one. Amazon Channels has been really aggressive. I think they rolled out almost 24 bundles, new bundle combinations last year. Though those break through and get people to try a service that they would have otherwise maybe been on the fence about.
I have another question as it relates to your clients. Do you, are you also providing them with data about YouTube viewership? Because this has become a big issue amongst all the
Yeah.
odds is, and certainly there are people out there like Evan Shapiro sort of screaming from the rafters about people not paying enough attention to YouTube. Is that part of some of the tracking that you're doing at this juncture?
So similar to what I said about when we first launched the subscription data, we've started with just the biggest players. So right now we're measuring the show viewership for the 8 biggest streamers. But not surprisingly, number one thing we get asked is, when are you adding YouTube? So YouTube's tricky. The viewership is so fragmented across different channels that it's much trickier to measure than a Peacock or a Paramount, where the viewership is very concentrated on a relatively small number of programs. But it's on our list.
Okay, but it's also a wide range of different types of content. It could be
Yeah.
everything from a short how-to video or shorts, like vertical shorts that people
Yes.
are sending out versus listening to a Rogan podcast for 3 hours,
Yeah.
which makes a difference. So, all interesting. I downloaded, and for those of you interested in knowing a little bit more of some of the data that is tracked. Antenna puts out, like, you publish something quarterly, don't you?
Yep. Our state of subscriptions comes out every quarter, and the new installment just came out about 48 hours ago.
Right, and I downloaded it, and it was interesting reading that yesterday that you're finding, I think, up to 40 some odd percent of people are gettable to come back to services within 12 months.
Yeah, the industry was really freaked out about churn, understandably, in the early days because they were spending all this money, to drive awareness and drive people to sign up for services. And then, if you're seeing 7, 8, 10% of them, if you have 10% of your subscribers canceling every month, do the math. What's 10% times 12, right? So it's not quite that simple, but it was not, they were not on the path to, they thought, to building sustainable businesses. Two things have happened. Number one, that churn has actually settled down quite a bit. And most of the streamers are now more in the, call it 4 to 6 range. Um, uh, so they're in much better position that way. But we've learned that for the most part, consumers don't cancel, they pause. So
What does pause
40,
mean?
so they'll stop the service, but with the intention of coming back when there's something
Okay.
else that they want to watch. And yeah, so the statistic that you're quoting is essentially within 12 months, 40% of people who canceled in 2024, within 12 months, 40% of them signed up for the service again.
Wow. So that's actually a positive factor, I would think.
Super positive. Yeah,
Yeah.
super positive. And other industries have built their customer rhythms, their whole operating rhythms around this. Like, think about the fitness industry. The fitness industry has a portion of people that will be with them forever, but what happens
January.
every January, right? You get a huge surge of win backs from people that are looking to start a new behavior. Every spring, you get people kind of getting ready for summer. So, I think streaming is still finding those rhythms, but it's really promising that they've learned that this is a pattern. This is a pattern which is much better than I think people originally feared.
So I have several questions that are coming in, and we're at the last 15 minutes here. So want to make sure that we open this up for people to engage and hit on some of the things that they would like to talk about. But I'm going to give you one here. I did ask the one about valuable lessons from your first venture. So, well, actually, let me go to that. Let's go back to your the first venture. Are there any valuable lessons that you learned in doing buzz metrics that you are applying now to what you're doing with Antenna?
Gosh, one of uh, one of the kind of wink wink pieces of advice I give to people coming right out of school is like I was, when I first got entrepreneurship, is don't do it. There's a real risk to, not even a risk, but the challenge of going straight into entrepreneurship is you make all the mistakes on your own dime, as opposed to kind of learning how the workforce works, learning how companies work, learning how sales work, right? While getting paid, you're learning that while paying for it yourself. Now, it's wink wink because worked out for me, and I, in retrospect, wouldn't change it at all. But you do have to go into it, and there's a beauty to the naivete. There's something, you bring fresh eyes if you are coming at it and figuring it out. You're on your first cycles within your own thing, but you have to go into that with eyes wide open, which I probably did not.
Well, you were also quite young, so I guess maybe are there things that you think that now that you're doing, well, let me pause here. now that you've had a lot of success, both as an entrepreneur and as a corporate executive, because you were running digital for Nielsen for a number of years, which is a very large organization. Um, are there things that you're doing now that you wish you probably had known back then, that would have maybe made the journey easier or better than what it was?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've learned having gone through a number of cycles is the timing and the pacing is a really important part of success. And it's tough for venture funded startups. There's kind of one model to success, and you got to go 0 to 60 really, really fast. And your investors don't have a lot of tolerance for a different path. And there's some misalignment, I think, between entrepreneurs and traditional VCs right now, where you always hear the VCs talking about, I want to find, I'm gonna make 50 bets in this fund, and I really am only worried about one of those 50 returning the fund. But if you're one of the other 49, like, you care about your outcome too, even if it's not a return the fund outcome. And what that results in is a lot of entrepreneurs then they kind of follow that blueprint. And if you don't get 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, then you just burn through all your money and you go out of business. And that's a shame, because I think that's not always the speed and pacing for every business. BuzzMetrics was we had our first $1 million year, our probably fourth or fifth year in business. But then by our sixth year in business, we were 20 million in revenue.
Right.
So it just took a while to get to. Antennas had kind of we took our time and paced it as well. And I knew it this time. I knew what pace we were going to be on. So I found VCs that were excited about that, that path and pace. But some businesses take a little bit more oxygen to develop, and figuring out what the right pacing is and having the tenacity, the resilience to stick to it is something that I see as a pretty important part of early stage success.
That's great. Okay, so I have a question here from Johanna Crane. How do you approach using AI tools to look at scrape data, and what type of considerations are raised when tying those trends to your panel data models for clients?
So our big AI opportunity in the long run, Joanna, is it's a little bit different. We are less worried about using AI to do interpretation of the data ourselves. And what we're really trying to do is to make our data one with our clients' customer data, so that it can fuel their AI models. Because all our customers, a couple of our biggest customers are, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. These companies are putting a lot of their own energy, understatement of the year, into figuring out how to build database AI models, and way more energy than we're ever going to be able to think of doing. So if we can actually get our data into their data, if it's fully integrated with their data, and we can power those AI models, that's much more exciting than anything I'm going to build on top of our data. So that's where we're really trying to go. An example of how that could play out, right now, if you log on to Amazon Prime Video, what are you going to see? You're going to see a bunch of shows promoted to you. All of that is based on the things that Amazon sees you doing on the Amazon Prime Video app, right? Well, a very large percent of people logging into the Amazon Prime Video app log in exactly 14 times a year for NFL football games. So Amazon, all they know about that big group of people is that they like Thursday night football. We know a lot of things. We know everything that those people are doing off of the Amazon platform. So if Amazon had our data integrated into those show recommendations, they could base their recommendations to the Thursday night football crowd based on what they're watching on Netflix and Apple TV. So that's an example of how we're thinking about use cases for this new AI-driven world.
Okay, Johanna, anything further there? Or are you good?
No, that's wonderful. Thank you for clarifying, and the example really helps.
Okay, so Liz Leahy, and hopefully I'm pronouncing everybody's names properly. How do you think about the antenna competitive landscape, both existing and possible new entrants? How does this inform decision making?
Yeah. Hi, Liz. So it's interesting with these marketplace data businesses. If you are not a one of one, you got a big problem. And that is partially just because, we're operating in particular in a relatively confined space. It's not like CPG where there's 1,000 potential customers. So just economically to be able to afford to build these great products, you kind of have to have the whole market. But beyond that, when Apple TV is sitting down with Amazon to negotiate that distribution partnership that I was talking before, if Apple TV and Amazon are, they're both fortunately bringing our data into that negotiation. If they're looking at different data, then they have a much harder time talking to each other. And so it's actually better, generally accepted, that it's better for the whole industry to be running off of the same type of data. And that's the same for lots of industries. And, in the financial industry, if the buyers and sellers of bonds were using different rating systems, that would make it much harder to do business. So we've been fortunate to establish ourselves as kind of the single source within the subscription space. Now that we are going into viewership, that is a much more crowded space, including that company that I used to work for has a thing or two to offer around show viewership. So that's a new dynamic for us that we actually talk about a lot internally. We have to figure out how to culturally change the way we do business to go out into the marketplace that that we're not the only option.
Do you think that it's going to require being a little bit more, developing different business models to approach it, just because there's nobody who can really be one of one in that particular area, and there are so many different varieties of it as well.
Yeah, what we've tried to do is we brought the product to market with a very, very specific set of use cases, which really are differentiated. And so when I talked before about the data around, Landman, us focusing, to help both Taylor Sheridan, who makes Landman, and Paramount, as well as all the competitors that want to understand the performance of that show, to get them focused on 3 million new subscribers watched the show. So it essentially drove 3 million subscriptions. That's a unique data point that nobody else is talking about. Nobody else is even trying to measure. So we focus on those very specific use cases, which are differentiated, and start there. Now we'll eventually branch out to more, but for right now, that's where we're trying to get our foothold.
Great. So I know we only have 3 more minutes. I have 2 questions in the thing, so I'm going to ask you to be quick so we get to both of them. One question from Jeff Reed: what advice would you offer to current Georgetown students who have an interest in entrepreneurship?
Get into it. I joked that you have to be careful about what you're signing up for when you actually start a business with no experience. But I would say maybe a third of our staff base have openly told us a big motivation for working for us is because they want to learn the startup business. And I think that's awesome. I love it. That's huge, huge points in favor of somebody when we're interviewing them. So that's the best thing is even if you're not going to make as much money in the short term, even if it's going to be, you're going to be doing some, some of the scrub work because everybody pitches in and builds their own desk metaphorically in startup world. It's definitely worth it to just live in that world and kind of understand the rhythms.
And last question from Jack Ringwood. Any emerging issues concerning consumer data privacy? Can Antenna verify that licensed data comes from consumers who have opted in to shared data request?
Yeah, that yes, and it's very important to us because we're intermingling our data with Apple and Amazon and Google, who have extremely strict data privacy governance. So yes, our world is a little more straightforward because it all is explicit opt-in. The grayness around what I'd call broader like digital exhaust data, the data that we all just sort of let off into the ether as we're going about our digital lives, that is where there is a lot of uncertainty and grayness, which I think we'll probably be still sorting through for as long as I'm working in this world.
Okay, well, I think that's going to be a wrap. Stephanie, can I hand it back to you right now
Yes.
for closing out?
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for a thoughtful and engaging conversation, Mary Ann and Jonathan, for sharing your insights, lessons, and experiences. We're so grateful for your time. To everyone else who joined us, thank you for being a part of this Georgetown community. We will send a follow-up email for more information about how to join both the Georgetown Angel Investor Network and the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance, two great resources that converged today on this conversation. So there's more information that you all can learn from each of those organizations in a follow-up email. But either way, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you have a wonderful.
And by the way, go to the Antenna website and
Oh,
sign up
yes.
to get the report because if you want to understand what Jonathan is measuring, it's actually a really interesting report, and I think you'll all find it fun and engaging to watch to read. Okay,
We can include that in the follow-up. I know it's out there, Jonathan, so we'll
terrific.
throw that in the follow-up email as well.
Thank you for the
Voya
promotional
Saxa.
boost.
Take care.
Voya
Thanks,
Saxa.
everyone.